Sup? Say, don't you love when video games not only come out on time, but also don't have any major game-breaking bugs to trip up on? Ha! Cyberpunk 2077 is a classic story of game development gone horribly wrong. The game was so unplayable at launch, in fact, that Sony and Microsoft had to do something they've barely ever done before and offer refunds for the game on their digital storefronts. But it's been over 4.5 years at this point since the game's launch, and it's received massive amounts of patches and even a full DLC expansion, Phantom Liberty. Has CD Projekt Red finally fixed Cyberpunk 2077? If so, what does this mean for the gaming industry as a whole going forward? Today, let's dive into the legacy of Cyberpunk 2077. The story of Cyberpunk 2077 actually begins decades before it even started development. In 1988, Mike Pondsmith, alongside his RPG publishing company R. Talsorian Games, published the tabletop role-playing game Cyberpunk. Pondsmith himself was additionally inspired by the film Blade Runner and the novel Hardwired by Walter John Williams, who also helped playtest Cyberpunk himself, by the way. This original game was set in the hyper-futuristic year of 2013, where the United States is devastated after a major conflict in Central America in the 1980s. As a result, mega corporations from the new superpowers of the European Common Market and Japan came to power, along with the Soviet Union surviving, which totally came true. You'll also find many familiar elements in this original tabletop RPG, such as netrunning, corporations like Militech and Arasaka. Even the setting itself is that of Night City, situated between San Francisco and Los Angeles, California. Ah, that's why Night City's like that! Anyway, after releasing other editions of Cyberpunk, Mike Pondsmith got into game development work at Microsoft starting in the 2000s, working on popular original Xbox titles such as Crimson Skies and Bloodwake in addition to the Flight Sim series. This trained him on what to look for in a game development studio, which helped when he got a call from the Polish developer CD Projekt Red, famous for their Witcher series. He was sent a copy of The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings, which had just come out at that time, which had him skeptically impressed. Mike told Eurogamer that, quote, Cyberpunk has pretty much been under license since its inception, and that nothing ever came through for a licensed Cyberpunk video game. He was also wary of CD Projekt Red's Polish origins, since Pondsmith was tasked with fixing up multiple Eastern European studios in his time at Microsoft. In his own words, quote, I had been to a lot of countries that had just come out from the Iron Curtain and worked with dev houses over there, so I figured CDPR was a bunch of guys in a little sweatshop somewhere. In one place in Hungary, they produced beautiful stuff, but it was literally a broom closet with 25 guys crammed over overheated monitors. That's what I expected.
Why is he describing my own software development experience?
Anyway, Pondsmith was greatly impressed by what he saw when he got to Poland. Instead of what he was expecting, he was put into a lavish hotel and given a driver who he said, quote, looked like he should have been driving spies around. Additionally, CD Projekt Red had a great studio with well-established tools, procedures, and general setup. He was most impressed, though, by the fact that CDPR knew so much about Cyberpunk. Once again, in his own words, quote, they knew more about a lot of the things we did in the original Cyberpunk game than anybody we'd talked to. There were points where I was going, I'd forgotten that, and I wrote the damn thing. I realized these guys are fans. They'd loved it because they had grown up playing it. Nobody had really looked at it from that standpoint before. They officially tied the knot when someone at CDPR explained to Pondsmith, quote, we had communism and we had Cyberpunk. Still a better love story than my own. CDPR actually had no idea of Pondsmith's game development experience until a while later, in which they decided to directly involve him in the game's development rather than just paying him for the rights to Cyberpunk. The specific deal apparently grants CD Projekt Red the exclusive rights to, quote, Cyberpunk 2077 backed stuff until the end of time and hell freezes over, with this meaning that CDPR has the rights to develop the Cyberpunk universe from the year 2077 onward. With this, Cyberpunk 2077 began proper development in its original engine, Red Engine 3, all the way back in 2013, after announcing the game a year prior in May 2012, but quickly realized that they had to develop a brand new version of their engine, Red Engine 4, mainly to accommodate the first-person perspective, something new for Projekt Red at the time, as the Witcher games are in third person. Bizarrely enough, the new engine was funded using a $7 million grant from the Polish government. CD Projekt Red had to develop this engine over the course of several years, with one report from CD Projekt, its parent company, stating it was working on the engine alongside Cyberpunk 2077 as late as 2017, just a few years before the game's final release. This engine included many advanced features that would contribute to its excitement and initial downfalls, such as hardware-accelerated real-time ray tracing and ambient occlusion, which are very intensive graphical effects. This particularly made the game hard to test on what were current-gen consoles at the time, the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. If that isn't a bad omen for things to come, then I don't know what is. Behind the scenes, things were not going so hot with this development either. Developers were worried about how much the game was being oversold in marketing, with former employees of the company stating that the promised hyper-customizable and endlessly explorable world was nowhere close to being true, according to the New York Times. Many former employees were also expressing their frustration with the company publicly on sites such as Glassdoor, a site where employees can review current and former employers. The employees detailed office rumors spreading via Discord, constant missed deadlines, infighting amongst management, and very poor planning leading to horrible development crunch, leading to the departure of multiple longtime engineers due to heinous amounts of overworking. And of course, this has always worked out perfectly in the history of video games, with zero notable disasters coming as a result. Anyway, that was the private perspective of it all. Publicly, we really didn't know much about this game for multiple years, only seeing an announcement in May 2012, a trailer in January 2013, and then not a lot publicly until trailers were released during E3 2018 and 2019, where they announced an initial launch date of April 16th, 2020. And this went off without a hitch. Just kidding, it was delayed 3 more times before launch. First to September 17th, then November 19th, and finally December 10th. This final delay caused the developers to receive death threats, which is seriously not okay, especially when 90% of the team was not informed about this delay until the last minute due to the potential of, quote, market abuse and manipulation of CD Projekt stock price on the Warsaw Stock Exchange. The reasoning behind these delays was to attempt to bring the PS4 and Xbox One versions up to par with the PS5 and Xbox Series S and X versions of the game, which is also insane foreshadowing. No way! How could this game that was getting famous for its delays and time crunching at this point have technical issues? What? Cyberpunk 2077 would finally launch on December 10th, 2020, and it was a disaster. Seriously though, things were not pretty at launch, especially on the, quote, current gen versions of the time. The PC version fared quite significantly better than those versions due to the increased horsepower that many gaming PCs could muster versus these 7-year-old consoles, but it still wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. In fact, the New York Times even published a featured article on this titled, "Cyberpunk 2077 was supposed to be the biggest video game of the year. What happened?" in which they note yet another hilariously prophetic tweet by the developers in 2018 replying to a question asking, "Will there be memes in the game?" where they replied, "Whole game is going to be a meme." Seriously though, things were not pretty at launch, with many instances of character models T-posing and even losing their pants, hilariously described on Reddit as straight tunnel duck in it. There are way too many video compilations on YouTube of the hilarious glitches that existed during Cyberpunk 2077's initial launch window to even fully mention, but I'm just gonna let some of them play here for a brief moment just to set in why players were so mad at this launch. This all led to Microsoft and Sony doing something that they usually refuse to do on PlayStation Network and Xbox Live, and actually issued refunds to customers based on Cyberpunk 2077's horrible performance, particularly on last-gen systems. Sony went even so far as to pull the game from the PlayStation Store entirely for a while. So that was the initial story of Cyberpunk 2077, a game that was made to revolutionize the industry, but instead being horribly buggy. However, a lot has changed since then, especially with the release of the anime based on this game, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and also there was a lot of hype for the Switch 2 edition of this game that came out back on June 5th, 2025. So what gives? What changed? Is Cyberpunk 2077 good now? The short answer is yes. The long answer is, well, this. Cyberpunk 2077 has been able to evolve from a buggy shell of itself to the game I think many of us were hoping to have all the way back in 2012 when the game was first announced. In the game, you play as V, who can either be male, named Vincent, or female, named Valerie, depending on your preference. In fact, many things about V can be changed to your liking, even their, let's say, no-no square. This feels very reminiscent of tabletop RPGs that the game was based on. V is a mercenary whose background is based on 3 main choices: Nomad, Street Kid, or Corpo. These backgrounds determine your starting stats, just like a tabletop RPG. No matter what you pick though, you meet up with Jackie Wells, a fellow mercenary, and netrunner T-Bug, and begin doing missions with them in Night City. This leads the group to get involved with Dexter Deshawn, a well-known fixer in Night City, who eventually gets them to perform a dangerous task, stealing a biochip named The Relic from Arasaka, a large megacorporation that partially runs the entire city. This all turns south fast when the group witness Yorinobu Arasaka murdering his father, framing it as a poisoning. During the turmoil that comes from this event, T-Bug is killed, Jackie becomes wounded, and V has no choice but to insert the relic into themselves to protect it due to its volatile nature and its protective case breaking. Eventually, Jackie dies of his wounds, and V is shot and left in a landfill to die by Dexter Deshawn, fearing the weight of Arasaka coming down on him. Here we're introduced to Keanu Reeves, Johnny Silverhand, who is stored on the relic and was a terrorist who died during an attack on Arasaka Tower in 2023, 55 years before the game's present day. V is rescued by Yorinobu Arasaka's father's bodyguard, Takamura, and they learn from the Ripper Doc, Victor Vector, that they only have weeks to live due to Johnny's engram slowly overriding V's mind. This sets the stage for the game, leading V to go on a full mission to try to get the engram out of their head. A truly wholesome and family-friendly backstory. Anyway, all that leads into the main gameplay itself of Cyberpunk 2077, in which it draws more comparisons to games such as Grand Theft Auto. You're thrown into a big open world of future California, in which you mainly reside in Night City. Night City is a hellhole of a city filled with corruption from its government to its police force, to the mega corporations that have a hand in almost every single aspect of daily life in the city. You drive around these areas to complete various quests, both main story and side quest type activities, which I personally find both of these pretty fun to complete, overall leaving you with a lot to do throughout Night City and beyond. This allows you to gain experience and Euro dollars, which in-game are commonly called eddies, and level up your character, in which there are 5 different main attributes which each have their own vast skill tree to them: body, reflexes, technical ability, intelligence, and cool. Also, like a tabletop RPG, you may need certain levels of these base attributes to go down certain paths or speak certain dialogue, which adds a nice element to gameplay decisions as well. I love how this system works overall. There are so many different choices to make throughout each playthrough, and a lot of these skills are quite nice additions to your repertoire. Plus, since many of the technical issues have been addressed, you can really immerse yourself in Night City. The visuals are simply breathtaking, and pops unlike any other game on the market, even over 5 years after its initial release. The missions you partake in throughout the campaign are incredibly well designed in the immersion department as well. I've found that there are quite a few games where most of the missions within feel a bit too fillery, if that makes sense. For instance, in GTA 5, a game I do love a lot by the way, there are several missions that don't feel as impactful, to me at least. The infamous Scouting the Port mission comes to mind, which has to be one of the most boring missions I've ever played in a GTA game. With Cyberpunk though, I really can't name a main story mission that I find useless in both the story and gameplay departments. Maybe sometimes one or the other, but not both, and I commend it quite a lot for that aspect. Now, does that mean Cyberpunk 2077 is absolutely perfect with 0 flaws to name? Nope, absolutely not. There are definitely still some awkward bugs left over in this game, particularly to do with how some AI-controlled characters act in some missions. Additionally, while I did give this game some praise for having certain dialogue options requiring certain attribute levels, I also just would have loved to see more meaningful dialogue options throughout. By that I mean, you'll see a lot of these dialogue trees with yellow and blue options. Only the yellow ones actually matter and progress the dialogue in any way. While I do like the flavor that the blue text dialogue options provide, I also would have liked that customizability, so to speak, by being able to choose from more meaningful options, since that is a theme of the game being based on tabletop RPGs. There are also a few control issues with the game, namely the driving controls. The driving simply still feels a bit too awkward for me to like driving in this game. Don't get me wrong, it's a lot better feeling than it was at launch, but there's a certain sluggishness to the driving that I feel is a bit out of place for the game and makes me not want to play some of the combat driving missions out of frustration of this. Overall though, the answer to the question from earlier still stands: yes, Cyberpunk 2077 has been fixed. However, that leaves us with just one more question. What does this mean for gaming as a whole going forward? What I mean is that Cyberpunk 2077 has been able to prove that it could recover from one of the most disastrous video game launches to date in a big way. Cyberpunk 2077 has already sold well over 30 million copies. That isn't likely to slow down too much with the launch of the Switch 2 edition. It's one of the only third-party games to be fully on cart so far, which is pretty sad. Does Cyberpunk 2077 now give greedy publishers more of an excuse to rush their development teams? I mean, obviously this problem didn't start with Cyberpunk 2077, with many AAA games becoming total disasters due to time crunch and development hell, and it would never have ended with Cyberpunk 2077 either way. Therefore, I'm fairly hopeful that this is indeed kind of a one-time thing. After all, CD Projekt Red has had a remarkable track record before launching Cyberpunk 2077, making 3 very well-regarded games in the Witcher series. Plus, with their parent company owning the PC store platform GOG.com, which is generally well-regarded for their preservation of various older games and anti-DRM stance, people have had more of a positive outlook on the company than most other AAA development studios ever had. Additionally, well, yeah, they did fix it. There was enough intrigue and excitement behind Cyberpunk 2077, combined with renewed interest via Cyberpunk Edgerunners, to help propel it into becoming one of the best-selling video games of all time. Many developers would simply rather leave their buggy games unfixed, EA, giving these games no chance of success. At the end of the day, it's also a bad business move for companies to have to spend a lot of time and money on having to fix their games post-release. Cyberpunk 2077 cost CD Projekt Red a whopping $125 million to fix up and get back into its proper state. That is an incredibly hefty expense that most studios with most titles just could not afford or want to take on. All of these factors combined do make me hopeful that Cyberpunk 2077 is a bit of a once-in-a-lifetime exemption to the old adage falsely quoted to Shigeru Miyamoto, a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. After all, we don't need any more companies taking advantage of the goodwill of their communities to crowdfund their billion-dollar games. Still looking at you, EA. I also think, though, as much as some out there will hate to hear it, we as gamers do have a role to play in this situation as well. I completely understand being impatient for a new game. As I'm finishing the script actually, I am still greatly anticipating the release of Tomodachi Life Living the Dream. However, the median gamer can sometimes be unreasonable in their demands to get a game out now, resulting in giving these publishers more of an excuse to rush their games and hurt their developers more, as that's what the people want after all. It sucks when your favorite new game is taking a while to launch, and I get that. But if you can muster up your remaining patience and give these developers some time to breathe, then you're more likely to get something specially good instead of specially bad. But in the case of Cyberpunk 2077, with the game it has now become, alongside CD Projekt Red establishing themselves as a more trustworthy development studio than most other AAA companies, I'm honestly willing to forgive them for the launch fiasco. In my opinion, Cyberpunk 2077 has really become the game that it's set out to be. It has one of the most immersive open worlds of its kind that really sucks me in every time I pop the game in. It also nails the goal of being a tabletop RPG converted into video game form, which I love about this game. If you haven't given this game a shot, either due to the turbulent launch, or you simply haven't gotten around to it, I would highly recommend it. This is an experience that I think most gamers would really appreciate. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Byte of Melon. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, I don't know, do all that stuff. Look out for some more stuff, hopefully not, a year after the first video. And yeah, see you next time.